Wow, holy peak fiction. This was a really good season finale. This is the best I've seen Star Wars written in years. I haven't had this much fun with a Star Wars show in a very long time in this galaxy of ours that is far away. And as always, spoiler alert for episodes 9 and 10 of Maul Shadow Lord. Now in these two episodes, similar to last week's two episodes, there's one giant action scene. One giant big event that happens. And that event is just basically both Lawson and Maul's group trying to escape planet Janix, but every attempt in doing so gets overshadowed by the Empire's clutches on Janix itself. On Maul's side of things, he's making a deal with someone from the Crimson Dawn, whose name I can't remember because I have a skill issue for remembering the super side character's name that only appear once in a lifetime, unless it's a side video game that nobody plays. But anyway, they make a deal to provide a ship for Maul to get off of planet Janix. However, they have to meet at a rendezvous point outside of the city. And what better person to help them with this task than Lawson himself? And Maul gets their attention by communicating with the Force telepathically through Devin. And although the group is hesitant at first, they realize that they have no other option but to go with Maul because everything else they've tried has failed. And what's really interesting about this is that a few moments later, Daki asks how Maul was able to get into her head like that, because it shouldn't be easy, especially for a Jedi, to get their thoughts penetrated like that. And she basically tells him that they have a little connection going on now because he saved her in the previous episode against the Inquisitor while she was by herself with Riley. And I like this scene because it shows that, you know, the connection of master and apprentice between Maul and Daki are growing even stronger indefinitely now, whether Devin wants it or not. Although her ideology is mostly the same, she's slowly but surely starting to think like Maul, because in the previous episode, Daki says that he hears her voice, but she's using Maul's words. She also knows that everything that Maul has been telling her this whole season is kind of true because she's experienced it for herself. She's experienced that there are much more worse people or forces out there other than Maul, even though Maul still is a villain or antagonist for Star Wars. And Devin still has enough common sense to know that Maul is too toxic or not good for her, but she also has common sense to know that Maul is exactly what she needs in this moment, especially if they want to escape planet Janix alive. Also, the way Maul communicated with Devin kind of reminds me of the way Rey and Kylo Ren used to communicate in the sequel trilogy movies for Star Wars, how they used the Force to basically Skype call each other. So that's what that reminded me of. That was pretty cool to see. And as the two groups meet up to escape the city, they run into this little squadron of stormtroopers in the AT-AT. And not only is Maul and Devin's connection getting stronger, but both teams' connection are getting stronger as well, because they are able to work together to outsmart that squadron of stormtroopers to escape further. Now eventually they get to this underground acid pool area where they can only bring 2 people to the other side using this floaty drone thing. And this is where the Inquisitors come find them along with some other stormtroopers. Now I like these Inquisitors being together again because it just further proves my point of the power of Master and Apprentice. Not only does it give strength in numbers, but just the way they're locked in during the fight, how they don't have to say any words together, but they're so well coordinated, they're synchronized in a way. It just shows how strong their connection really is between Master and Apprentice. And thankfully this time Maul is not alone because he has an advantage of power in numbers, as he has Daki and Devin on his side. Now during this fight, both sides do have the power of Master and Apprentice. On the Inquisitor side, we have the Crow and Marek, and on Maul's side, we have Maul and Daki being the Master to Devin, who is the Apprentice. And similar to last week's episode, you can just see both fighting styles of Jedi and Sith clashing together, old and new, because the Inquisitors have those new and advanced automatic spinning lightsabers, whereas Daki, Devin, and Maul have to use older techniques to fight them. And the fight choreography here is so good. It's really amazing, super intense. It's really enough to get the heart racing, and is super well animated. Now during this battle, unfortunately, because this is the season finale, there has to be casualties. And unfortunately those casualties belong to Maul's side of things. A lot of the characters we see are kind of perishing left and right, but they're sacrificing them for the greater mission of getting Maul off the planet. And this just reminds me of how Maul once again is having the Empire take away everything he's worked hard for or everything he's built up until this point. Similar to how in last week's episode we learned how Palpatine took everything away from him by forcing him to, move away from his home planet. So if you really think about it, Maul has been losing to the Empire his entire life, from his childhood all the way up until now. But I kind of do appreciate things playing out this way because, again, this is a prequel to when we see him during Star Wars Rebels Season 2's finale, where he's all alone by himself in that Sith temple. And the whole idea with that situation is that he's lost everything, just like he's losing everything here. And we even get a cool nod to Starkiller from the Force Unleashed games, which are no longer canon, but funny enough, the voice actor for Darth Maul is the same voice actor for that character, which is known as Starkiller. And after escaping that encounter, the remainder of the group finds himself in this foggy forest area, and here's where we get the meat and potatoes of this episode. Everything goes silent. More members of Maul's group gets taken out by a mysterious force. A shadowy figure appears, and is no other than the man, the myth, the legend himself, Darth Vader. And this was really cool to see. We finally get to see Vader interact with Maul. It's something I've always wondered about ever since I started getting into Star Wars at first. If they would fight one day and who would win. And unfortunately for the group's case, the power of numbers or Master and Apprentice gets pretty much shut down immediately here. You could clearly see the huge skill gap between Vader and everybody else here. You can see everybody's trying their hardest, putting all their effort into getting one hit in on Vader, and Vader's just blocking everything with one hand. He's just doing this for the love of the game at this point. He's basically toying with them. Now the interesting thing I noticed throughout this whole fight, even though the team gets separated and it's just Maul, Vader, and the other Jedis, Vader is not focused on those other Jedis, he's focused on Maul. And I think that's a reference to episode 1, because Darth Maul did kill Qui-Gon Jinn in episode 1, and Qui-Gon Jinn is the very first person to see Anakin's potential, which is why he was recruited in the first place. So I could kind of think of this as revenge from Anakin, because that's who's under there obviously, getting revenge on Maul for killing Qui-Gon Jinn. Also, it's his mission to kill Maul from Lord Sidious obviously, so that just amplifies it even further. And you could tell he's just focused on Maul because when he's clashing sabers with everyone else, he's kind of hesitant with his moves, he's kind of slower. Yeah, his armor or his suit is tanky, but he's been seen moving fast before, especially with his fight against Ahsoka. But here, if it's not Maul he's clashing saber with, he's pretty hesitant. He actually force pushes them out the way a couple times. But when he's clashing sabers with Maul, he's doing that overhead lightsaber slam with two hands. And you know when Vader uses two hands, that's when he's starting to get serious or starting to get angrier throughout the fight. And two more big interesting things happen during this fight actually. The first interesting thing happening being the fight with Maul, Daki, and Vader. They end up having to fight Vader alone by themselves as a duo. And here's where we see Maul being calculative again, as he has been throughout this whole season. He sees this as an opportunity to just basically leave Daki behind fighting Vader by himself. And he knows that Vader will overpower Daki, and this will give Devin enough rage if she sees it for her to join his side, because he's also been telling her this episode, in order to win this fight alive you have to give into your rage, and Daki has been against that. So now with Daki out the way, he could tell her again to give into her rage. It's the only thing that's going to give her more strength and power, and she could fully give into it without her former master, telling her no, that's not okay. And although this was a pretty cowardly move by Maul himself, I also like it because it just reminds us as the audience, Maul is a villain here, or he's still an antagonist here. Yeah, the show is called Maul Shadow Lord, and we're kind of supposed to root for him because he's the main or title character, but he's still a villain at the end of the day. Other shows nowadays kind of forget that when you're writing a story about a villain as the main character, that character has to do villainous things, and they kind of turn him into an anti-hero. Here, it seems like Maul is going to become an anti-hero, but they flip your expectations and still shows that he's doing things for himself, he's still pretty selfish, he's still being an antagonist. And the other interesting thing I found during this whole thing is how Vader is still toying with everyone. He eventually counters Devin and he's toying with her because he could have easily killed her. But he's using Devin as bait here to lure out Maul, because his mission at the end of the day is Maul. Vader is starting to realize that he can't get Maul because Maul is more agile and, a lot faster than Vader, because Vader's robotic body isn't that fast in this case for whatever reason, but it's very durable. So the best way to get someone that keeps running away is just to reel him in with some bait. And what better bait is there than someone you're trying to recruit as your apprentice? And Maul catches wind of Vader's strategy here of using bait and collapses the whole temple around him. That's Maul's new go-to move. Whenever he's losing, make sure it's in an open space, otherwise Maul is going to force pull everything down around you to escape. And another thing interesting I'm starting to notice with this whole encounter with Maul and Vader and everybody is that Maul might actually be washed. He might actually be on fraud watch here. And I'm only saying that because he's been telling everyone else that anger is the key to getting more strength or more power to fight against the Empire. But Maul hasn't been angry himself. He hasn't been practicing what he's been preaching to everybody. This whole season he's been calculated, he's been calm-minded, he's even been merciful more than he should have been. And that eventually caught up with him, as we seen in last week's episode when he was fighting the Crow and Merrick, the Inquisitors. And in this episode, the only reason he escapes Vader is because he's able to tap into that anger for a brief moment again and force pull everything around them, allowing them to escape. If he didn't tap into that anger again, Maul could have died right then and there. Meanwhile, while that's going on the side, we have Captain Lawson basically sacrificing himself or using himself as a distraction to lure all the other stormtroopers away so everybody else can escape. And they made it kind of look like he died in a big gunfight, but I don't think he's dead. I think he's actually still alive. And what this reminds me of is the scene from the Clone Wars where we have Gregor fighting all those droids by himself. And there's all these explosive barrels here, and he's using that to his advantage. And there's this giant explosion, but we see no confirmation of a dead body. And they didn't censor it here. Like, the only time Star Wars has really censored stuff was during Star Wars Rebels, but that's because it was for a much younger audience. Anything other than that in Star Wars doesn't usually get censored. If people get shot or stabbed with a lightsaber, they show it. So if they were truly gonna kill him off, I feel like they would have showed it instead of just having him disappear in the fog like that. But it's thanks to this sacrificial move that everybody was able to get on that Crimson Dawn ship and escape Planet Janix. And on that Crimson Dawn ship, we see everybody together. We see Devin and Maul kind of have an interaction that's interesting to me as well, because she's holding the second half of Maul's lightsaber that she used during the fight against Vader because she lost her other one. And Maul tries to retrieve it back, but she snatches her hand away, basically confirming their bond as master and apprentice, because she's full of rage right now. She wants revenge for the death of Master Daki, which she doesn't know was caused by Maul. And this is all, part of Maul's plan. So he took a big calculated risk there, but it ultimately worked in the end. It kind of fell into his lap, kind of how like everything else in the first half of the season was falling into his lap. So before, Devin wasn't 100% sure about Maul. She kind of had a soft spot for him, kind of like a love-hate relationship, but now she's 100% on his side because she doesn't have her master there anymore to kind of keep her in check. Because her master was the last connective piece between her joining Maul's side or not. And now that that's been destroyed, she kind of has no choice. And if this isn't setting up for season 2, I don't know what is. So I'm very excited to see where all of this goes. Now, I have some theories in case they do a season 2. First theory is that Lawson is not dead. Now with Lawson, the stormtroopers will capture him and they'll most likely take him, or he'll most likely encounter his ex-wife, which is a high-ranking Imperial officer within the Empire. Now her whole thing is that she's gonna interrogate Lawson on the whereabouts of Riley, and he's not gonna tell her, and that's the only thing that's gonna keep him alive for now. She's gonna keep Lawson alive for the sake of Riley. So there might be a situation where the ex-wife has a change of heart and she kind of recruits him to be either a stormtrooper or some kind of Imperial officer, maybe a rank slightly below hers. And if Riley has both of his parents join the Empire due to forced circumstances, that's definitely gonna cause some tension between them, because it's gonna have inner conflicts with what both of their group's goals are. And I know that kind of sounds like me coping, but I really do see a lot of potential when it comes to Lawson's ex-wife here, because she's working with the Empire, and we actually see her character model during the hologram call that Riley had with her. And we know the Empire, invaded their home planet, And I already have a theory from back then that the reason that the Empire didn't take over the planet yet was because of her ranking as an officer in the Empire. Maybe she was somehow keeping the Empire away from that planet. Also, her reaction to Riley saying that they arrested his dad was kind of too nonchalant for me, even if they are divorced. She could clearly see that Riley is worried or panicked, and she couldn't care less. So I just want to see what happens with that storyline right there. My second theory is with Maul and Devin. Now, as we see in the end of the episode, Devin is 100% ready to accept Maul's training and ideology because the last connectivity between her being good or evil has just died with Daki. Now, she doesn't know it yet that Maul betrayed Daki, which caused his death, but I think she will find out some way, whether it be through Daki's Force Ghost or Force Echo or something with the Force. But the Force will find a way to tell her that her master was betrayed by your current master. And already being filled with so much rage from her master's death, this is going to give her even more rage to go against Maul, but she's going to have to play the long game because she needs Maul to train her more. And she's going to use the rage that she has from not only her master dying, but finding out that Maul was the cause of her master dying. And I think that's going to eventually lead up to them having another duel where he tries to kill Maul, and something's going to happen. Either she walks away from him permanently or Maul kills her himself. And I'm only guessing this because, like I said before, in Rebel Season 2's finale, we see Maul all by himself. He pretty much has nothing. Everything he's worked up for in this series is gone, taken by the Empire. And maybe this also could explain why he was so crazy about recruiting Ezra as his next apprentice, because he was almost successful in recruiting Devin as his full-time apprentice. Overall, I give episodes 9 and 10 a perfect score of 10 out of 10. I really like the direction the show is taking. I like how it's basically the story of how Maul loses everything. In the first half of the season, Maul is winning everything, he's calculating everything perfectly, and then we get reminded by the Empire just how in over his head Maul is, or how too ambitious Maul is with these plans he has, as the Empire slowly but surely strips all of his resources, once again as they did with him when he was a child. And this show also really impressed me for a prequel, because usually for me prequels don't work because there's a lot of continuity errors, or Star Wars especially uses prequels to retcon things that were already established in future projects. But you know, for here, prequels only work for me if they introduce a completely entire cast of new characters, which is what they did here with the exception of Maul. But again, this is the story of how Maul loses everything, which is why we see him by himself in that Sith temple during Star Wars Rebel Season 2. But them having a new cast of characters just helps build the suspense, because I didn't really have much suspense from Maul, even though he did seem like he was losing a lot of fights in the second half of the season, and that's because, like I said, we see him alive in future projects beyond this show. Now for the new characters we got introduced to this season, that's where the interesting stuff is. That's where my heart was racing during the finale on whether they'll make it out alive or not. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where the show goes. They're definitely setting up a season 2. Hopefully we do get a season 2. And I hope they do it in the same manner of releasing 2 episodes per week. And that's going to be about it for this review of Maul Shadow Lord. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And also, like always, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, along with the notification bell to be notified when I make more videos. And until then, I'll see you guys on the next one.